this room know Michael Snyder, maybe not, but I'll bet half of people do. And I'm going to admit that I saw him speak twice on the economy in a group setting, and we tried to beat him up. And we tried to ask him questions, and I tried to find a chink in his armor. He was unflappable, in my opinion. He's been a Clairemont resident for many, many years. His child or children has gone to Madison. He is the president of the Clairemont Mesa Education Foundation. He's one of the co-leaders, if not the founder, of Clairemont Day at the Bay. He loves trying to get. He's not in it for any type of promotion. He just wants to make this community better. And without saying too much more, what's the state of the Clairemont economy? Let's welcome Michael Snyder.
I'll give you a little bit of my history and why you'll find I like to walk around the room a little bit. When I graduated from college, which was USC, actually I have to go all the way back. When I was 7 years old, my family moved to San Diego, and we moved to Clairemont. And we had a wonderful life here. The schools, the experience, graduated college from USC, got a job with Merrill Lynch, worked with them for a number of years, was an operations manager, cut my teeth on the markets with good old Mother Merrill. And then finally left there and came back to San Diego and was living on Ocean Beach and found out we were going to have a child. My wife said, not necessarily Ocean Beach, where would be a good place to raise a child? And I immediately said, we're moving back to Clairemont. My mom was living here, my sister was living here, and we moved back to Clairemont. And that was, it was 21 years ago. My son is now in his, starting his last year of college. And it's funny, Clairemont was different. It wasn't the same. It wasn't as strong a community. But there were parts about Clairemont that were the same. And that was the fact that it seemed distant. It didn't seem to have the strength and vitality that a lot of other communities have had. And Clairemont's always been like that. Part of what I wanted to talk about a little bit today is that it's changing. Now, to go back out of that, as for where the markets are and how it's affecting the economy and affecting our community in here in Clairemont, I'm glad you didn't ask me 2 months ago. We actually were expecting what happened in the markets to happen. A lot of people were nervous, a lot of people were upset, and we just said, no, it's supposed to happen this way. Relax, the markets will come back, and they did. But then we weren't all that positive, and I got news for you. In the last few weeks, we've been kind of looking at what's going on, and the picture actually is brighter than you might think. And I think especially here for the community of Clairemont. And really, after talking to Richard as to what they wanted me to talk about, I started looking more at the community of Clairemont and San Diego and how it fits within the general economy of the country, of the state, and of the world. And I like where we are. I like where we're going. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that idea. One of the things I wanted to touch upon was on the real estate part. Now, one of the interesting things about real estate over the last 7, 8, 9 years is how much it has matched the general market itself. As the market went up, real estate was going up. Whenever the market would take a drop, real estate would take a drop. This is unusual. We rarely have seen the real estate market and the stock market match each other so closely as we have in the last 7, 8 years. But a lot of that has to do with the fact that real estate more and more in the last 10, 15 years has become not so much purchasing a home, your home, the place to live, but using real estate as an investment vehicle. And I think a lot of the real estate agents know that, is that more and more people are buying homes as investments. Well, as the markets go up, people start feeling good about investments, so they are buying they buy more investments, therefore they're buying more property, they're buying more homes. As the market drops and they start to feel a little less fortunate, a little less happy, they stop investing. They start to sell. And so that's why we've seen this cycle. The hope is that there's going to be a decoupling, a delinking, as I was telling you, between the two. So the home prices, real estate actually just starts to flow as it naturally should. As as opposed to always matching what the market's gonna do. I'd love to tell you that the markets are wonderful and that they're gonna go up and up and up. That's not likely to happen. We're expecting maybe a 2 to 3% growth in the market over the next year. There is this persistent fear, and it's realistic, that the market might have a correction. And this time when the correction happens, we're not going to have a federal government that's going to step in and print another $9 trillion. Not only that, but even too big to fail is now illegal. They pass a law. This next time around, if something starts to fail legally, they have to let it. Last time we looked at AIG, we looked at General Motors, we looked at Hartford Insurance Company. You guys all have to remember we're actually the major shareholder of General Motors to this day. People in the United States own General Motors. That's not going to happen. We're also not going to print $9 trillion. We might have another quantitative easing 3 or 4 or quantitative easing 5. But is real estate going to decouple from the markets? And one of the questions that leads to that is, who are the investors? Who are the people right now who are buying homes as opposed to 5 years ago? The purchaser of property 5 years ago primarily were companies that buy homes. So companies that are out buying every piece of home or every piece of land they can get. Now we're facing even another investor who's common, and that's foreign investors. They're coming in the United States. China actually, in and of itself, has a rule. They're allowed to remove $50,000 in cash. They're allowed to, if they purchase property, real estate, or businesses, to bring millions over. So how many of you have had recently, with real estate agents, have had Chinese or Far East investors? They're here, and they're here for a reason. It's the only way to get the money out of China into the United States. And how many here have had a question recently or have heard from politicians and the like that the United States is weak and that we are not the favorite place in the world anymore for investors? Entirely wrong. We may be carrying a $21 trillion deficit. We're actually thinking about raising rates. In Europe, there are now 9 countries that have negative interest rates. Japan itself is in negative interest rate territory. They are printing money. And I was asked today, actually by one of my partners, why is the market still going up? Earnings are down. Why are markets still going up? Because this is now the strongest place in the world to invest your money. That's actually not possible. So even though we're carrying a large debt, we're also going to be carrying low interest rates for a long time to come. So we're actually borrowing money right now at 0.5%. That's not a terrible debt to carry. So we just have to watch what the government's going to do. Now, what is the effect on Clairemont of all this debt, of all of this growth? So just looking at what I've seen in Clairemont, I had 2 discussions, and I worked with the schools. I'm the Madison Community Schools chair. I've got the North-Based Education Foundation at one of the community schools. Over the last 10, 15 years, we have had a concern, and that is the aging population. And I remember when I moved in, it was about 20 years ago. People like myself that didn't older. So they're doing one of 3 things in the book. They're either getting reverse mortgages because they've got to stay in the homes. They're selling the properties, or they're turning their properties over to the children. Where is that dynamic happening? And I've heard this as far as, and even University City is now concerned about their schools. Something is happening in Claremont. We're getting younger. It's becoming more vibrant. And looking at, and I was talking with him earlier, looking at small businesses here in Clairemont, they are investing in Clairemont. We're becoming this little area in the city of San Diego and the state of California where there's strength now. I'm actually very pleased. I'm still living in Clairemont. I'll be here probably for the rest of my life, or until I get one of those people where I do a reverse mortgage or finally turn it over to my son. But at the same time, I'm actually very pleased with where Clairemont is right now. You see that when you go over to where it used to be the Bourbon Shopping Center. You have to understand, when I moved here, I can't remember if there was a store on that. I know where Home Depot is, that was a dirt lot. San Diego ended at Genesee Avenue. There was nothing north of it, and in most of Clairemont, there was nothing here at all. But I am seeing some real strength in Clairemont that I haven't seen in the past. So just looking at that, I'm seeing growth in retail. I'm seeing some real positive effects here in Clairemont that I have never really seen before. Even where the old, how many know where the Clairemont Quad is? Yeah, good old Clairemont Quad. I was there when they built it. I was 9 years old. I know. I was there when they built the Clairemont Quad. And at that time, if there was a sign, something is happening in Clairemont, they build on all the property. But in the meantime, now we're starting to see those buildings starting to change for the sake of refurbishing, new growth or renewal. So I would just say my perception of what is happening in Clairemont, Clairemont is strong and healthy. Now, going back to the markets, I'm not that concerned with the markets either right now. They're down, earnings are down, but on the other hand, we're at some of the worst places we've been. And we seem to be surviving them very well. Commodity prices are down because we're not seeing that much global manufacturing. And yet our economy just keeps going along. Granted at 2%, 2.5%, but in weakness, we're still growing. That's a real positive from my point of view of looking at what we're doing. I always warn clients, if you're investing, make sure you diversify and maybe come home a little bit. Maybe not invest so much in what's going on in Europe or the Far East, in Australia, Latin America. Maybe settle more on home. But we always have this ability to then circle back and come back to what's in the United States. I do warn people, be careful with the mega global conglomerates. But how many people in this room think that Ford is an American company? Not only do they not make cars here, the vast majority of their cars are not sold here. And most of the money they have, they keep in foreign banks. They're not an American company. But keep an eye on, especially on the mid-sized companies and the entrepreneurs. One of the things I work with in the schools right now is with workforce partnership. We're seeing a lot of growth, especially in San Diego, in the biocom, the biotech industries. Tremendous work. We're getting funding from the state of California on much of that, but we're also not dependent upon it. I know with the schools, they keep looking for money to come. Larry and I often talk about where the schools are at. We're out in the communities, and we're actually bringing partnerships to the schools. And we're working together, business and schools. And this is unique, and it has shown real success. And we're getting a lot of encouragement from the district itself. And I think you're going to start seeing more of this, even in the schools in Clairemont. So just to kind of touch back on a little bit of that, very positive on Clairemont right now. I'm glad I live here. And I'm glad to see the strength that we're starting to see in the schools again, in the small business owners that we've got in Clairemont. Yes, there is this concern about the markets. Yes, there is concern about the global economy, but it's a matter of insulating ourselves. And I think one thing about here in San Diego, but especially here in Clairemont, we are relatively insulated from a lot of the bad stuff that's been happening in the rest of the world. And I know Richard wanted me to touch a little bit upon the elections. Do we really need to go there?
I don't know.
Good. The only thing I can say out of the elections is it is an election year. This causes turmoil. So you're going to see over the next 6 months to a year turmoil. I do want to warn you that there is this pending concern in the world economy, but we're starting to see it start to rally a little bit. What we're truly hoping for is that we don't have that major recession. Because if we actually have that here in the United States, we don't have interest rates to fall back on. To touch a little bit upon interest rates, yes, they're going to go up, and my answer to that is thank goodness. Please do. The sooner that you do, it might be a little painful, there might be some risk, but we need interest rates. We need them to go higher than they are. Several reasons. Number one, I have a lot of retirees who are my clients who are dependent upon those U.S. Treasury bonds, getting at 4.5%, 5% once upon a time. They can't do that anymore. I'm almost to the point where that's gotten to me to be criminal, that we don't have that opportunity for people. Now, certainly interest rates going up are going to affect home prices. They're going to affect prices in general, but if they're done properly and they're done slowly enough, much like the last one, which I think was way overblown as far as the markets, I think they need to happen. And it's also a confidence builder. When the Federal Reserve came out the last time and talked itself out of raising rates, the markets actually reacted worse because it told the marketplace itself, this economy must not be strong. And that was a disaster. I was actually, myself personally, not that I know her or that you would care, but Janet Yellen, I was angry at her. Just do it. You keep saying, I'm going to raise rates because we're doing well. Raise the rates. Now, is that going to affect us in the community? It'll affect us. You'll see rising mortgage rates, but you'll also see rising saving rates. You'll see opportunities to be able to invest your money that are more reasonable. It's actually going to bring the market down once they do it, and it has to. And there's one basic reason for that, and it's the same reason of why the market is going up. There's nowhere else to put your money. So once we start to see a raise in interest rates, you know, that in and of itself will be a positive. Obviously, it's going to cost the city more money to issue its own bonds. But we're not talking 1970s where interest rates were 13, 14, 15%, people. We're talking 3.5. You know, 350 basis points. All right, the city might actually have to issue 7% bonds. On the other hand, my clients will buy them because 7% on a municipal is going to be a wonderful thing again. And if you see a 350 basis point rise in mortgage rates here in Clairemont, does that mean that 80-year-old, that 75-year-old is now forced to keep their home? They're still going to sell them. And they're going to sell them because they need to move out of those 4-bedroom homes and into smaller homes. And I always tell people when they come to me, what am I going to do if I've lost my equity? What are you going to put the money anyway? You're buying another property. And if your price is down, the property of the new home is down. So you're not losing anything. You're taking a loss and turning it into an opportunity anyway. And if you focus on the idea that it is a home in the first place, it's not that big a disaster. It's the investor who's going to truly suffer, but the investors are just going to have to be forced to hold on to their homes until the prices come back. So here in Clairemont, we're going to see, I think, some good times ahead. Looking at the retail market is getting very strong. But I do hear people saying out in the community, something is happening in Clairemont. And they talk about it with the schools, they talk about it in the growth that we have. They talk about it in the marketplace that we have. we are getting stronger. And I also think that there's, especially with younger people coming into the community, they're more community oriented. Whereas Clairemont was always this bedroom community, and it was never a community itself. I'm starting to see community, which is refreshing and it's wonderful. And I'd like to see more of it, and I want to see that grow. So I also wanted to, I know Richard said, talk for 45 minutes, but I love questions. I love the challenge. So does anybody have any questions so far? Yes?
When the GM debacle happened,
Yes.
if you were a stockholder, did your value of your stock go to zero?
It almost did until the federal government stepped in.
Okay, so people really didn't lose that stock?
No.
I heard that they basically lost their stock.
No, what had happened is the banks themselves, and what happened is the United States government itself stepped in and started buying shares to prop it up until we actually became majority shareholder.
You knew
So
that.
yeah, this was slightly different than a company like Hartford. You have to understand, I was, 2007, we knew something was coming. We knew something was really wrong. And then Mr. Bernanke started to raise rates, which was a good thing. And then we suddenly realized what was wrong, and that was all these bubbles that had grown. Not only in the marketplace, but also in real estate, in many different areas. It's like the Wild West. We weren't playing with that many rules. And when I heard that Hartford itself, now Hartford insurance companies were major insurance companies, it also has more than 50% of all annuities held by seniors. Annuities are wonderful products, but they're backed by the value of the company itself. So you can give all your money to Hartford, put it into an annuity, Hartford goes under, your annuity is zero. This is the majority of seniors in America who have lost all their savings. This was a nervous time in 2008, 2009. Was TARP a bad thing? No. we needed something, but we also needed rules. So now we have some rules in place. Then the federal, part of that, the federal government printing $9 trillion. And then turning around and buying its own bonds in order to keep the interest rate. Yes?
I also agree that there's something happening in Clairemont. There's an energy level that's rising, and I want to do something a little bit different in a way. Claremont's always had a problem with our geography.
Working with schools now, Bay Park Elementary School. My next meeting is to speak to the school board on our outdoor experience project, and I'm actually going to be referring to the Clairemont Town Council and the change that's happening here in Clairemont. So things are happening. Yes.
What do you think the impact of the growth of UCSB will be in the community? It's already impacted UTC. They're constantly buying more land, they're building up, student population is expected to be on about 45,000 in the next 10 years. How is that going to impact Clairemont?
Well, there's two things that we're looking at in parts of the community. First of all, we're going to have the trolley going in. We're just going to have a stop directly at UCSB. So I'm starting to think that what we're going to see actually is some of that student body, some of that being more spread out. One thing I do want to point about, well, the other thing too is keep an eye on what they're going to be doing down in Mission Valley. If they're going to be actually doing an expansion down there for San Diego State and UCSB. This to me is one of the most encouraging things I've heard about in a very long time, is the combination of combining San Diego State and UCSB as universities. So there is going to be some impact. Fortunately, we have this buffer called University City. It's kind of like Cap Pendleton has been the buffer from Orange County to us until some of that started to leak over into Fallbrook and some of the North County areas. There will be some, but I think it's going to be mostly John Wayne. I think what we're going to see is a lot of that coming down and moving into the areas with home prices and residents and more people
One thing about Clairemont is it's hard to build anymore or bring more here. So, for instance, in the area in the schools, they were thinking about that. They sold the school property, and then the school district said, if we need to, we'll build a new one. Until asked, and then realized there's not a square foot that hasn't already been developed. So unless we start removing properties to build huts, as opposed to, I don't think you're going to ever really see that many back except for the jobs. We might see commuter, but that's where I hope the trolley is going to be able to move people back and forth. My son is looking to go to UCSB graduate school. And I told him, well, it's lying to a college building. Then you can go back and forth on the phone. Until then. You know the one thing about the community of Clairemont, and this was an interesting thing I learned years ago in working with the school district. Demographically, the community of Clairemont matches the city of San Diego almost exactly. Same number of families that are in low income, the same minority differentiation, and it matches almost perfectly that of San Diego County. So that's why the school district actually looks at us and some of the organizations we partner with. If we can make it work in Clairemont, we can make it work anywhere. We are actually becoming the model community for the district to look at in the school district and in the city and the county. If we can do it here in Clairemont, we can do it anywhere. Clairemont is being recognized for the fact that we have that much diversity. Go ahead.
Mike, I wanted to, before you leave, go off of something you said. I'm thinking about it, and you're right. There's a lot of new people coming, new families, but the two biggest populations are the baby boomers and then the millennials. There's a big bust in between, right? And I know in my own neighborhood and what I've seen door to door, there's a lot of people who really even shouldn't be in their homes anymore. Even in my own block, the ambulances are there all the time, but they want us to be in their home or they want to be in their community. It's that whole aging in place.
Yes.
Where people want to stay in their communities, but we don't have enough in the Clairemont area of senior, assisted living, memory care, any of that. So they're staying in their homes as long as they can. At the other end, the millennials are the other big population boom that we've seen, and they're in their 20s, and they're getting married, and they're starting to need what? Homes, right? So if we could build, and we're doing a whole community plan update for Clairemont right now, because it's 30 years old and the zoning is terrible, it needs to be rezoned to make it easier to build these kinds of facilities with community support. And the people who are in this room, a lot of you, I heard, are in the real estate and related industries. If we can get the seniors stay in the community, but into these other homes, there's going to be a lot more homes to be sold, and our schools are going to thrive, our businesses are going to thrive, and we're going to have young, more vibrant community. And then if there's development, that helps with the population, the parks, the libraries, and the infrastructure. So this is on the verge, but if there's support for that scenario in Clairemont, this is going to be a really great place and very different in the next decade. And thank goodness they didn't close Cadman, because Cadman's now going up.
Yes. No, and before, I'll get to go ahead.
The perfect place to build a home like that, where people kind of sit in place, they don't drive too much, would be that lot on Moraine and Clairemont Drive.
Well, that's a whole nother long story.
We had a $30 million building.
There has to be.
Along transit corridors, like Balboa, like Clairemont Drive, like Clairemont Mesa Boulevard, so that they can take an easy transportation.
Well, that's a perfect place.
So that's perfect place. You want to walk across the
I couldn't agree with you more.
You want to get out and go to Veterans Hospital?
Totally agree.
There's a couple of ways I need to respond to that. First of all, my mother, I grew up in Mountain Streets. My mother was 85 years old. All her children grown and gone, and wanted to stay in that home. My sister and I now living in Clairemont. It was easy to kind of take care of her and the house until she developed dementia. And then we moved her to a facility in Powell, and eventually sold the house. But I know, talking to the schools, we've been waiting. we call it move it, we've been waiting for that bubble to move. I was talking to Ernie, if you look at the level, when does that bubble finally start to move? And we kind of laugh about it, but we wonder, when are these people whose children, like my mother, went to school in the 60s and 70s, graduated and are gone, and are still here, because they need and want to stay in their own homes. I was actually a speaker because of my mother and that effect that I saw with dementia and Alzheimer's. I became a speaker on Alzheimer's with the Alzheimer's Association. And so I got to talk to families about the effects of the expenses and what it meant money-wise and moving to facilities and things of that nature. And one thing about Clairemont, it has lacked certain things. One thing, I mean, if you look around Clairemont, how many family support programs are located in Clairemont? Very few. And yet we have the same percentage of minorities as virtually any other community or within the city. Nothing is located here. Senior housing, none of it is located here. There are going to be changes for it that are going to be coming, and they're going to have to happen as that population, if you look at this, it was Reuben H. Fleet asked me to submit a grant with them. But they said, oh, the demographics are all wrong, we can't get the grant. And that was because Clairemont was 60% middle income and above. Except for one thing, that 60% were over the age of 50. Those people who had families, children, were 60% below middle income. So here we are with the families with children who are low income and needed services. And the homeowners who are all 50 and above. That's what we're going to see changing over the next 10, 15, 20 years. And the schools, they kind of refer to it as moving the bubble, as we jokingly add, as these people start to die off. The thing is, they're not going to die off. They will become a burden on the community as they're staying at home and they're not getting the services they need. We're getting the ambulances, we're getting the police out looking for the dementia patient who's out wandering. So these are things within the community we are going to have to discuss and recognize. But where do we build facilities of that type? How do we build them in such a way that they're affordable? One thing on long-term care, it's typically 80 to 85,000 or above per year. Now these people are going to have to be selling their homes, being able to live in a facility for 4 or 5 years. So it is going to be curious. But here in Clairemont, we have this aging population. And that's going to be an interesting idea as to what the community of Clairemont does. And we as a community think of it as Clairemont, not counting on the city to solve that problem for us. So we kind of got a little off track, but that's something that's dear to my heart and something that I work with on in the community as well. Any other questions?
Just a comment. I heard that we have 80,000 people, correct me if I'm wrong, and that Clairemont is the largest community in San Diego County. That's amazing to me. Am I wrong on those numbers?
It's close. You have to bear in mind that right now we're going to put in, how many, Lori, you can answer this for me. How many people are we putting into Mission Valley?
No, I can't answer that.
Oh, okay.
Not our district.
Mission Valley is expected to top 120,000. Now you imagine that's all along Prairie Road.
But
So
that's
you
high
put about
density,
3,000.
right?
So, at least that's not
It's not single family homes, that would be high density.
Yeah, it is.
Right.
high density,
Demographic difference, yes.
which means people are still going to be looking at Clairemont during that time really as the place to live. They're going to be, we are going to be the place to live and centrally located.
You've got to go, and I promise you I'd look
Oh, yeah,
after your
that's right.
schedule.
Oh,
Go get your
thank you.
car and